A woman called 911 in the middle of the night, terrified that someone was outside of her home lurking. She needed help, waited for the deputies to arrive, and then opened the door to let them in. But inside her own kitchen, things took a deadly turn. How? Why did the situation escalate so quickly? And what exactly happened in those final moments? Today, we're going to walk through the full story of Sonya Massey, from her family history and the events leading up to that night, to the moment that the shooting occurred, and the findings that would later become central to this case. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happened inside that kitchen and why this case has sparked outrage across the entire country. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell before you go. Also, for any new friends here, please be sure to stay to the end of the video for a little introduction because I want to get to know you too. All right, sit back, relax, and let's get into today's case. Sonya Lene Wilburn was born on February 12, 1988, to Donna Massey and James Wilburn. She grew up in a very large but also very close family. People who knew Sonya from childhood remember her as a girl with an energetic personality, a natural gift for drawing people in, and that she loved the color purple. She was talkative, expressive, and quick to laugh, and she just had this ease with strangers that made rooms feel warmer whenever she walked into them. Religion was also a very important part of her upbringing, and not in a performative or preachy way either. She was deeply faithful, and she lived her life in a way that actually reflected that. She attended 2nd Timothy Baptist Church in Springfield, and she wove her faith into her everyday conversations all the time. Remember that as we move throughout today's case. Her family relocated to Springfield, Illinois, which is about 200 miles southwest of Chicago. And Springfield is not a large city with a population of only about 115,000 people. This city also has some deep wounds because in August of 1908, a race riot erupted there when white mobs were terrorizing Black residents, destroying property, and they murdered 2 Black men. I promise that I'm bringing this up for good reason, though, and it does tie into today's story, but this was a catastrophe so alarming that it led to the creation of the NAACP in 1909. One of the victims of that 1908 riot was a man named William Donegan, and he was an elderly Black man that was killed near his own home. According to Sonya Massey's family, William Donegan was her ancestor. She was the direct descendant of a man killed by a mob in Springfield more than a century before her death. Another haunting point that I want to make before we get too far into today's story is that when Sonya was transported after being shot, she was taken to St. John's Hospital in Springfield, which is the very same hospital where William Donegan was brought in 1908. As she grew older, Sonya got married and took the last name Massey, but her marriage eventually ended. She decided to keep the name because it was tied to her identity as a mom and with her church community because people had always known her as Sonya Massey for many, many years. During her marriage, she had 2 beautiful children, Malachi Hill and Jeanette Summer. She went by Summer, and their mom absolutely adored them. They were her entire world, and both of her kids still know that. By 2024, Sonya was living on Hoover Avenue in Woodside Township in Sangamon County, which is just outside of Springfield. The neighborhood was quiet, and it was lined with older single-family homes and mature trees. It's your typical working-class central Illinois neighborhood. Her home has a front door that opens into a living area. Towards the back of the home was the kitchen, which is a small, compact area with a stove against one wall, a sink nearby, and a counter that divided the cooking area from the rest of the space. I will add pictures so that it makes more sense, but that counter will become very important in today's story. Even though she had so much to be grateful for, Sonya had some pretty significant health challenges up until the time of her death. Sonya had been diagnosed with lupus, which causes fatigue, joint pain, skin rashes, organ damage, and in some cases, neurological deficits too. Living with lupus is a daily struggle with pain and unpredictability, and I'm sure that some of you here listening right now have either experienced this firsthand or have had someone that they loved suffer from it. It is a lot to manage for anybody. She had also been diagnosed shortly before her death with paranoid schizophrenia, and this was confirmed by her son and her mom on the news. Schizophrenia typically presents with hallucinations, delusions, and disorganized thinking. You usually see the signs show up between 25 to 35 in women And like many psychiatric diagnoses, it's a spectrum. Malachi and Donna shared that Sonya had been taking her medications at the time of her death, which many people have debated because of what happened. She was being treated, though, and the diagnosis had been recent. These are all important things to remember as we continue on today. In the days before her death, Sonya was admitted and then discharged from a behavioral health center about 10 miles outside of St. Louis. County records confirmed that her mom, Donna, called the police multiple times leading up to July 6th, reporting that Sonya was acting erratically, including one time where Sonya was attempting to drive. In each call, Donna stressed the same thing. Her daughter needed help, and she was not dangerous. She was in distress. Her mother also said that in the days before the shooting, Sonya had been saying that she was going to die. In a mental health emergency, statements like this are terrifying. I can't help but wonder if this was perhaps part of her schizophrenia, like maybe some type of delusion, or if this was a type of premonition. This led to repeated calls from Donna to the police to please go check on her daughter. Now that we have quite a bit of background information on Sonya, we're going to talk a little bit about the officers involved in today's case. Sean Patrick Grayson was 30 when today's story takes place, and this officer had a pattern of concerning behaviors that were well documented, reported, and then systematically overlooked by multiple institutions across the span of several years. Grayson enlisted in the U.S. Army in May of 2014, and he was assigned as a wheeled vehicle mechanic at Fort Riley, Kansas. He did not complete his enlistment, by the way. By February, he received a discharge for misconduct for a serious offense. The Army declined under the Privacy Act to specify what exactly that misconduct was. A discharge like this typically leads to at least 1 year of incarceration, though. Whatever Grayson did in the Army, the institution found it serious enough to end his service early. That is a big deal. What is known is that in August of 2015, while he was still enlisted, he was charged with driving under the influence. He pleaded guilty and paid $1,300 in fines for that. Then in July, so just 5 months after his discharge, he was charged with a second DUI. He pleaded guilty again, and this time he paid $2,400. This all took place before he was even 22. 2 DUI convictions and a military discharge for serious misconduct. Sean Grayson then began his civilian law enforcement career in August of 2020 with a part-time position at the Pawnee Police Department. This was a small department in a small Illinois town. Over the 4 years that followed, he would work and leave 6 separate law enforcement agencies in central Illinois before finally arriving at the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office in May of 2023. 6 departments in less than 3 years. Take from that what you will, but I personally find that very alarming. I guess the informal term for this is called a wandering officer. Officers whose misconduct or poor performance is known to supervisors at one specific agency, but it doesn't travel with them, which allows them to cycle through departments without any accountability for what may have gone wrong in the prior place. At the Kincaid Police Department, Grayson lied about a warrant that didn't even exist. A man named Kyle Adkins was stopped in a traffic stop where Grayson claimed that there was a warrant and evidence against him, but neither of those existed. The case went on for 2 years before finally being dropped. Fabricating a warrant is illegal and a misuse of police power, and that is not me implying this, by the way. It is literally the law. Grayson faced no serious professional consequences for this, and he moved on without any issues to the next department. At the Auburn Police Department, notes from his chief said that he was an officer who struggled with report writing and that he was very aggressive. He bragged on his Facebook about his drug arrests and was not great with evidence, according to the chief. The chief expressed serious concerns about Grayson's behavior and temperament, and they did document it, but when Grayson moved on to his next employer, they weren't aware at all of what the chief had found. At the Logan County Sheriff's Office in 2022, Grayson went against direct orders from a supervisor during a high-speed chase, reaching speeds of over 110 miles an hour. He turned off his lights and his siren as he continued the chase, which is against their protocol too. He only stopped because he hit a deer. His supervisors held a meeting afterwards and they discussed whether or not he should be fired, but they chose not to. And they also didn't report this incident to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board, which, if they had, then it would have created an official record that future employers could have seen. That was a major error. Sean Grayson was then hired by the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office in May of 2023, which was 14 months before Sonya Massey was killed. Sheriff Jack Campbell conducted a background check on him, and he saw that he had 2 DUI convictions and the Army discharge. He still hired him anyway. I also found out that he had stage 3 cancer at this time, which will come up again later. And when I say he, I mean Grayson. Because of Donna's repeated calls to the police on July 5th, the day before her murder, body camera footage shows that just hours before the incident, Sonya Massey had a peaceful, separate interaction with law enforcement. This was just hours before she was killed. Officers checked on her earlier that same night, and in that video, she was totally herself. She seemed calm, present, and she was even cracking jokes with the police officers. She cooperated with them and had zero hostility while they were there with her. That footage is important, and it matters for 2 reasons. First, it shows us that Sonya was capable of calm, cooperative interactions with the law enforcement, even if she was struggling with her mental health at the time. And second, it shows that the night of July 5th was a calm one for her. Shortly before 1 a.m. on July 6, 2024, Sonya Massey dialed 911, so this wasn't her mom calling in a wellness check this time. She reported that she believed a prowler was outside of her home on Hoover Avenue. She was terrified and she needed help. Calls like this are very common to the police. The call was dispatched to the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, and deputies Sean Grayson and Dawson Farley were assigned to respond. Farley was sent as backup, which is normal for an overnight call involving a possible intruder or even just suspicious activity in general, because it could turn into a dangerous call. They arrived at Hoover Avenue not long after that initial call was placed by Sonya. The deputies checked outside of the property before they approached her door. Using their flashlights, they walked around the yard and the surrounding areas, but they didn't find anyone hiding near the house or anyone attempting to break in. The perimeter was cleared by them both. There was no prowler, no sign of forced entry, or anything else that seemed off. During the outside search, though, the deputies did notice that there was a black SUV parked in her driveway. They didn't know if the vehicle maybe belonged to Sonya or someone that she knew, and an unidentified vehicle could mean that someone was there that shouldn't be. Deputy Farley stepped away briefly just to run the license plate through dispatch, but in that short period of time that Farley was doing that, Grayson remained near the doorway alone, and this is when the interaction with Sonya began. Several moments passed before the door opened. Sonya opened it and she was holding her phone, but she seemed calm. The deputies explained that they had searched the entire outside of the property and they found nothing suspicious, and then they asked her about the SUV in the driveway. She told them that the vehicle did not belong to her. That led to even more questions because an unregistered vehicle was at her residence and she didn't know who the owner of the car was. So this could mean that somebody else may be in the area that shouldn't be. As the conversation continued, Sonya said, "Please God," and she repeated this. Then she said, "Please don't hurt me." These were not the words of a threatening person. These were the words of a frightened, vulnerable woman that was afraid of an intruder. Grayson reassured her and said, "Why would we hurt you?" Then the deputies entered her home, stepping inside to continue the conversation, and they also needed to make sure that she was safe in her home as well. But then things took a turn. Once they were inside, the deputies could see into the kitchen area from the living room. There was a pot of water that had been heating up, and at first this didn't seem unusual because Sonya was just probably making herself some food. The deputies continued to talk to her, and they asked her for ID so that they could document the call, and she went to go look for it as the deputies stood inside of her house. At some point, Deputy Grayson noticed the pot and he asked that she could turn it off or move it. He felt concerned about a fire hazard while they were inside the home, but instead of Farley going and moving it, Sonya just got up and walked to the stove. She picked up the pot, and body camera footage shows her briefly teasing Grayson for backing away from the steam. The vibe quickly shifted after that joke, and Sonya Massey lifted the pot from the stove and spoke a phrase that changed everything. She said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." She said it twice. Her voice was even, and it was not a scream or a command. Deputy Grayson reacted quickly. His voice became loud and aggressive within seconds. The shift was abrupt and unmistakable on that body camera footage, and he responded by threatening to bleeping shoot her in the bleeping face. Both deputies then drew their firearms at that moment, and you can see this all play out on the video. Drawing a weapon tells us that both police officers believed that there could be a potential threat in that moment. Sonya had not made any aggressive movements toward either deputy, though, and she was still standing behind the counter. The counter acted as a barrier between her and the officers, and she was not moving towards them. She was not even raising the pot in a threatening manner. Sonya's response to Grayson's threat absolutely terrified her. She immediately began apologizing as she lowered the pot towards the sink because she was trying to comply with their earlier request to move it. She was actively trying to de escalate the situation as these officers had their guns directly pointed at her. Then Sonya crouched downward near the counter, and as she was moving away, she said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry." In the final seconds of her life, Sonya Massey was crouching down and apologizing, but then Deputy Sean Grayson fired his weapon, and Sonya collapsed onto the floor. One bullet struck Sonya Massey in the head. She fell behind the kitchen counter, partially hidden from the deputy's line of sight. The body camera footage captured every second of that moment. I do not recommend that you look it up, but I do remember seeing this video in full when this happened, and it was incredibly difficult to watch. At 1:21 that morning, deputies said over the radio that shots had been fired and a female had been struck. This prompts dispatch to send emergency services. As Deputy Farley moved toward Sonya's motionless body, he reached for some dish towels to apply pressure to her head wound. Grayson looked at him and said, "She's done. You can go get it, but that's a headshot." When he said go get it, he was referring to their medical kit in the car. He didn't attempt CPR or render any aid aside from Farley applying pressure with the towel. Also, the nurse and me cringed at that moment because Grayson told him he could go get it when Farley was the one on the ground doing the only thing that he could in that moment to try to save her life. Grayson kept his firearm pointed toward the area where Sonya had fallen for a few seconds, and then he changed his mind and went to go get his own medical kit. Farley said that he had the situation under control and that he didn't need any additional medical supplies, but Grayson threw the kit on the floor. Then he said, quote, "I'm not even going to waste my med stuff then," unquote. He also referred to Sonya in the moments right after shooting her as crazy. Now, I'm no expert in police behavioral analysis, but this isn't exactly screaming remorse, guilt, or shock about the shooting, if you ask me. Emergency services arrived, and Sonya Massey was transported, like I mentioned earlier, to HSHS St. John's Hospital in Springfield, the very same hospital where her ancestor, William Donegan, had been taken after the riot in 1908. Sonya Massey was pronounced dead at 1:47 that morning at only 36 years old. She'd called for help, and she'd been killed by the man who answered that call. Now, before we get too far into the crime scene and what transpired afterwards, we need to talk about Sonya's autopsy. This was conducted by Dr. Nathaniel Patterson, who is a forensic pathologist at the Sangamon County Coroner's Office right after her passing on July 6th. Now, we typically see a much longer wait period. I'm sure you've noticed this before, but because this was a police shooting, they acted quickly. The results were released publicly 20 days later. Sonya's clothing was saved as evidence, and the external exam showed that she only weighed 112 pounds. She was a petite woman in both weight and in stature, and the most significant visible trauma was to her head. The pathologist carefully measured, documented, and took pictures of each wound, though. The gunshot entered Sonya Massey's body just beneath her left eye in the periorbital region. To understand why this location matters, both forensically and clinically, I think it'll help us to walk through the anatomy of this area a little bit. The periorbital area is a highly dense place of the face. Directly behind it sits the orbit, or the bony socket that houses the eyeball and its surrounding structures. And just below, and more center to that, is what we call the maxillary sinus, or your sinuses. A bullet traveling through this path would disrupt muscles, bones, and the internal carotid artery. We've talked quite a bit about this vessel in our videos, so I'm sure that many of you know that if I mention the carotid being injured, alarm bells should automatically be ringing in your mind. The carotid arteries are arguably some of the most important blood vessels in the human body. When they're injured, the heart continues pumping blood through the damaged vessel, leading to a rapid hemorrhage in whichever area of the body has been hit. Dr. Patterson found that the left internal carotid artery had been completely transected or cut in half. In a hospital operating room with a surgical team and all the necessary tools and equipment nearby, an injury like this can sometimes be survived, but that would be rare. On the floor of a kitchen, though, the prognosis definitely wouldn't look good. But remember, even if things don't look good, first responders should always try to intervene and save someone's life. That is literally their job. From the moment that that artery was hit, Sonya Massey's heart was actively pumping blood through her body and out of the wound in the back of her neck. Her blood volume was decreasing, her blood pressure was dropping, and her brain was deprived of the oxygen through the blood that the carotid would typically carry. This is what it means to literally bleed to death, and it all happened on the floor of Sonia's kitchen. She also suffered a skull fracture, which makes sense given that the bullet entered her skull, but the autopsy also found that although the bullet didn't directly hit her brain, Sonia still had a significant brain injury. The bullet passing near the brain created a pressure wave called a blast effect that disrupted her brain tissue. At that same time, the force of the bullet's passage likely damaged the outer layer surrounding the brain, which caused additional bleeding and severe, irreversible brain trauma. Dr. Patterson testified that the most painful conclusion from this autopsy, though, was that Sonia might have survived if her severe bleeding had been controlled quickly after her shooting. They did need that medical kit. Her left carotid artery had been severed, but in trauma, rapid bleeding control can sometimes keep a patient alive long enough to get to surgery. The ME himself told the jury that people have survived similar injuries when hemorrhage is managed, immediately at least, but it was never even attempted. If Grayson had used that medical kit, then things may have turned out differently. Deputy Farley tried to help using the dish towels to apply pressure, but the officer who fired the shot, Grayson, did not assist or use his supplies. Because the neck is a difficult area to control bleeding, we can't know for sure if intervention would have saved her life, but according to the forensic testimony, attempting hemorrhage control was the only chance that she had at survival. There was also a toxicology report done, and the results showed gabapentin and THC in Sonia's system. The defense argued that these substances may have affected her perception and reactions. Medical experts said that gabapentin is a widely prescribed medication, and THC is legal for adults in Illinois, and their presence does not cause dangerous behavior. Once the full report was completed, though, the forensic pathologist ruled the cause of death as a gunshot wound to the head, and the manner of death was homicide. This report, paired with the video, made it crystal clear exactly what happened here. Now, to bring us back to what happened immediately after she passed, Sonia's home on Hoover Avenue turned into a full crime scene. Under Illinois law, officer-involved shootings are usually investigated by a different agency to avoid any bias or conflicts of interest, and the deputies who were inside the home that night, so Farley and Grayson, were separated to get their statements. The Illinois State Police took over the investigation, and their investigators went to the scene, they attended the autopsy, and led all reconstruction events. Within days of the shooting, an ISP investigator gathered all of Grayson's work records, training history, and use of force policies from Sangamon County. Everything moved at an unusual speed for an officer-involved shooting because this was all completed in full within about 10 days of the incident. That means that they got the full investigation done before the autopsy results even came out, which I'm sure you know is very fast. Inside the house, especially in the kitchen area, they documented every single detail you could think of, like the body position of Sonia where she fell behind the counter, the placement of the stove and the sink, the pot of water, and the shell casings on the floor. Investigators also paid specific attention to the pot that had been on the stove, and they checked it for fingerprints, plus they looked at the amount of water that was still left inside it. The temperature of the water mattered too, because part of Grayson's defense was that he was afraid the hot water would be thrown at him. The Illinois State Police completed their investigation, and they reached a conclusion that shocked Sangamon County. They decided that Sean Grayson was not justified in his use of deadly force, meaning this was murder. They did not describe the situation whatsoever, even as a close call. They made it known that what happened in Sonya Massey's kitchen did not meet the legal standard for the use of lethal force under Illinois law or U.S. constitutional standards. That finding was forwarded to Sangamon County State Attorney John Milhiser. On July 17, 2024, a Sangamon County grand jury indicted Sean Grayson on 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated battery with a firearm, and 1 count of official misconduct. He was held without bail and pleaded not guilty the following day. His defense team appealed for pretrial release all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court, but they denied it. The body camera footage was released to the public on July 22nd, 2024. During that time, Massey's family, who was represented by civil rights attorney Ben Crump and the NAACP, pushed for immediate release of the video. They felt that transparency was essential for justice, and so the public could understand exactly what happened that night. The family viewed the footage privately at first at the NAACP headquarters in Springfield before it went public, which I'm so glad that they did. When the footage went out, it spread like wildfire. It was shared millions of times on social media within hours, and it was all over the news. Protesters gathered in Springfield, Chicago, New York, Hartford, and Atlanta, and the footage was disturbing because it showed exactly what happened. You could see everything in real time with audio and everything that took place from the moment that they arrived to the moment that Sonya was dying. Grayson was fired from the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office shortly after the footage went public, and Sheriff Campbell's termination announcement was that Grayson did not act as trained or in accordance with their standards. This was the same sheriff that was aware of his past when he hired him. He also ended up retiring from his position. In July 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice confirmed that they were going to be looking into Sonya Massey's death. In November, the DOJ opened a civil rights investigation into the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, not just into Grayson specifically. The DOJ's letter to county officials stated that the shooting raised serious concerns about the entire department's interactions with Black residents and people with behavioral health disabilities. Their investigation focused on patterns and practices, how use of force complaints were being tracked, how calls involving people with mental health crises were handled, and how Black residents experienced interactions with their department. On January 16, 2025, they reached an agreement. Sangamon County committed to expanded de-escalation training for their law enforcement officers, improved protocols for handling mental health crisis calls, and more comprehensive use of force data collection. That agreement was basically them admitting that what happened on the morning of July 6, 2024, led to a woman dying who had done nothing wrong but asked them for help. In February 2025, Sangamon County officials approved a $10 million civil lawsuit for Sonya Massey's family, and this was negotiated by Ben Crump. If you've been here for a while, then you know Ben Crump's name by now, because we've mentioned him in quite a few cases before today. The family accepted this settlement, but they also made it clear that no amount of money could replace what had been taken from them. Sonya's children, Malachi and Summer, were still teenagers, now navigating young adulthood without their mother, but they would be the beneficiaries of this settlement. The criminal trial of Sean Patrick Grayson began on October 20th, 2025, so not long ago in Peoria County. 12 jurors were selected, and the prosecution's case focused on three main areas. First, the body camera footage. Then, Dr. Patterson's autopsy testimony, especially the possibility of survival with prompt intervention, and that her death was a homicide. And last but certainly not least, Deputy Farley, Grayson's own partner, took the stand and said, under oath, that Sonya Massey, quote, never did anything that made me think that she was a threat, end quote. The defense presented Grayson's own statements, and he took the stand on October 27th. Again, for anybody here that watches a lot of true crime, that I'm sure that you're already thinking that this is an unusual choice in a criminal defense case. He told the jurors that he had interpreted, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," as a threat, that he truly believed that the boiling water was going to be thrown at him, and that he feared for his life. He acknowledged that a taser was available instead of a gun, but he claimed that her clothing would have made that very difficult and ineffective. Officers tase people all of the time that are fully clothed, so that statement made me kind of scratch my head. Let me know if you did the same thing. On October 21st, the prosecution dropped the aggravated battery and official misconduct charges, so the jury had to focus on if they felt this case was murder. The jury viewed the body camera footage unblurred, and the impact in that courtroom was described by the reporters as visceral. Some jurors looked away and one wept. Members of the Massey family had to excuse themselves at different points because they were struggling to watch, and that breaks my heart for them. Not to get on a soapbox, but I cannot imagine how painful it has to be to initially see their loved ones murdered on tape, then have to hear about it and see it over and over again through a drawn-out court process. It is just so devastating and re-traumatizing. The jury returned its verdict on October 29th of that same year, which was guilty of second-degree murder, not first degree. The jury accepted Grayson's argument that he had genuinely believed he was in danger. The Massey family was devastated by this lesser charge. The state attorney stood before the court and asked for the max sentence available under Illinois law for second-degree murder, which is 20 years, followed by 2 years of mandatory supervised release. He said if the max were more, we would be asking for more. The defense asked for 6 years because Grayson's cancer had progressed to stage 4. So his attorney argued that incarceration would compromise his access to treatment and potentially lead to a quicker death. Let me know your thoughts on that. Grayson addressed the court afterwards, and he said, quote, "I made a lot of mistakes that night. There were points when I should have acted, and I didn't. I froze. She didn't deserve to be yelled and cussed at and called names," end quote. And he said he was sorry. Donna Massey stood before the court and said, "I lost my short-term memory. Today I'm afraid to call the police for fear that I may end up like Sonya. She was one of the smartest, sweetest people I ever knew." The judge sentenced Sean Patrick Grayson to 20 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, so the max. And when the sentence was read out loud, Massey family members cheered before being asked to maintain order by the judge. Sonya's daughter, Summer, was only 15 when her mom died, and she told the reporters outside of the courthouse that 20 years is not enough. With time served and potential sentence reduction for good behavior, Grayson could be released after serving as little as 8.5 years. He will be in his late 30s or early 40s at that time if and when he gets released. Sonya Massey doesn't get that same grace, though, because she's going to be forever 36 years old, and her family will never be the same because of it. In May of 2025, the Illinois House of Representatives passed House Bill 1953, which was named the Sonya Massey Bill. The legislation requires potential law enforcement to authorize the release of personal background records to hiring agencies, including job performance reports, use of force incidents, and non-public settlement agreements. It is the first of its kind in the entire nation. The governor signed it surrounded by the members of the Massey family, saying that Sonya's spirit guided them to action. The timing was powerful too, because it was near the 117th anniversary of the Springfield race riot that led to the foundation of the NAACP. Sonya Massey's funeral was held on Friday, July 19, 2024, 13 days after her death, and she was buried at the Oak Hill Cemetery. Hundreds of people attended, including family, friends, community members, activists, and elected officials. The hall was jam-packed, and the service was beautiful. Sonya Massey said in the final moments of her life, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." She was speaking to what she felt was darkness, and she was claiming the only authority that she had left, which was calling upon God for protection. Sonya deserved to live a full life. She deserved to grow old and watch her children grow. She deserved more years of being the kind of mother who surprises her son with a car that she was saving for so long without anyone even asking her to. She deserved all of it. I hope and pray that she is resting peacefully and that her children have found some sense of comfort despite all that they have been through. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Hello to all the new faces here, and if you've made it this far into the video, and if you're new, please take a second to introduce yourself in the comments. Also, I'm sure that you've heard it before, but we do have a blue butterfly secret handshake here, so let me explain that a little bit to you and just kind of tell you a little bit about myself. The butterfly is a very special symbol to me because I am a thyroid cancer survivor, and the butterfly is the symbol for that. You can probably see my scar hidden behind the microphone if you look closely. Also, my nickname given to me as a baby by my grandfather in Greek translates to butterfly. My husband is my favorite human, and I couldn't do this without him, and we're expecting our first baby, which is very exciting. Don't worry though, our weekly schedule will not be changing. Prioritizing diversity and inclusion around here is incredibly important to me, on my channel at least, so you will see a mixture of cases that I choose and cases that you recommend as well. I am a full-time working registered nurse. It's my calling, but true crime is where my heart is at too. It feels full circle to be able to advocate for people through nursing that are both here or have passed, so in a way it feels like we can advocate for victims by sharing their stories too. Okay, that's enough about me. I'm so grateful that you're here, and if you've made it this far, don't forget to drop our secret handshake in the chat, and please leave me some case recommendations down below that you would want me to look into. Please take excellent care of yourselves this week and do some self-care. Nurse's orders. I'll see you next time.